Welcome to Impact Farming, where we introduce you to the people and ideas that will have a massive impact on your farming operation. Brought to you by Farm Marketer. Sit down, start the engine, and let's roll with today's show.
With an ever-increasing demand for potassium due to increasing crop yields, there is a need for a better source of potassium with improved availability and uptake potential. Alpine K-Tech is the most plant-available form of potassium and is able to enter the plant quickly and easily. As a foliar application, K-Tech is tank mixable with many crop protection products, thereby increasing the grower's resource use efficiency. K-Tech offers balance, fertility, and an added energy source for the plant. The latest development of premium crop nutrition is doing a lot more with a lot less for your crops. Learn more at www.alpinepfl.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Impact Farming Show. Today, we have two amazing guests with us. We have Bruce Lowe and Ellen Grant from Ag Direct Hail. Welcome.
Hey, hi, Tracy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me. I have these two special guests joining us today to continue on in our risk management series, focusing on hail insurance. Are you guys ready?
Let's dive in.
Excellent. Before we dive right into the good stuff, I would love for you to introduce yourselves and a bit about what each of you guys do.
Well, perfect. Bruce Lowe, and I am the CEO, owner of Ag Direct Hail Insurance. Ag Direct now has been in business for the last 7 years. We're going into our 7th season, Tracy. And we were the first and we remain the only exclusively online and direct crop hail insurance provider on the prairies.
Excellent.
Right. And I'm Ellen Grant. I'm the Ag Direct Hail General Manager. I've been with the company since day one, so been there right from the beginning.
Excellent. Well, we are excited to have you guys. So why don't we dive right in, and I would like to get you guys to share a little bit about hail insurance on the prairies. Who are the major players?
Perfect. I'll take that one. Tracy, real quick though, if we can save a little bit of time at the end, because Ellen does this really, really funny stand-up comedian act that she does at Yuck Yucks, and it's all about hail insurance. Honestly, if you can imagine someone making hail insurance funny and fun, it's Ellen. So we'll save it. Ellen will do a little stand-up routine at the end.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Oh, excellent. The grand finale.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So let's get through it. I do want to save enough time if we can. So let's talk hail insurance prairies. So at the very highest level, there are 3 prairie provinces, the government programs that do offer a level of hail insurance. Both Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba do offer crop hail insurance. Then on top of that, there's 5 private line companies, okay? Usually a farmer can buy the government program and then top up and use the private line insurance companies to add to their coverage, or in a lot of cases, some farmers don't want anything to do with the government program and they go straight to the private line company.
Okay.
In total, there is about $300 million spent in premiums annually on crop hail insurance. Okay. It's quite a big number, and that fluctuates primarily with, the quality of the crops from year to year. Another factor might be commodity prices and how well the commodity prices are doing and what value the crop the farmer has out on the field. And, certainly growing conditions. And last year we had a really bad year with drought, so the crop insurance wasn't as high as we had seen in prior years. But traditionally, crop hail insurance is sold through a series of brokers. There's about 900 brokers that are licensed to sell hail insurance on the prairies.
Oh, wow.
A farmer would either go into town, into an office and sit with the broker, or the broker would come out and sit with the farmer at his location, at his farm, and they would go through the land locations and they would go through the requisite information to build a crop insurance policy. That, in our opinion, is a little bit yesterday. As with Ag Direct Hail, we don't use brokers or agents. Our customers come directly to us, and we eliminate that cost of the broker, which can run anywhere from about 10 to 15% on top of the cost of the policy. Farmers don't see that cost, but it's in there. And as the name suggests, we're the only direct model out there. So, Ellen, can you think of anything else you wanted to add as far as the high level?
No, I think that's kind of a good summary of the options that farmers have, whether they go for a government option or a private market, for sure. And like Bruce mentioned, we do things a little differently at Ag Direct, but those are the options farmers have for sure.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing. So with our risk management series, we are really going through all of the main tools, and this series has lasted and is going to be lasting for a few more weeks. Probably 2 months it's going to be running, because there are a lot of tools out there. And I'm happy to have you guys on to speak about hail insurance, because you're passionate about what you do. And I also really want to dive into how it works. Let's not assume everybody understands it. Let's dive in, and I would love for you guys to share how hail insurance works.
Of course. So we can start with the basics, and then of course get a little bit more specific and dive a little deeper if you'd like.
Okay.
But with hail insurance, there's 3 things that a farmer needs to consider: what you're growing, where you're growing it, and how much coverage you want. And we're talking about your insurance per acre when I speak about the coverage that you want.
Okay.
The answers to those 3 questions will determine your premium, or how much your insurance policy will cost each year. And it's a really simple calculation, which our website does for you. Everything's done automatically on our website. But you just take your number of acres and multiply that by the coverage level that you want. So again, that's your insurance per acre. And that will give you your total insurance or your liability. That's the kind of level of coverage you're looking for there. So for an example, let's say you have 350 acres that you're trying to insure, and you'd like $100 an acre coverage. We're going to multiply those 2 numbers to get $35,000. Now that $35,000 exactly represents the total coverage. So if this is full coverage and you get 100% write-off storm, major storm comes in, that $35,000, that's your loss award. That's the check that's coming your way after the assessment's been done. So for that $35,000, what is that going to cost you? And this is where what you're growing and where you're growing it comes into play. So your crop type is a factor. Some crops are different rates to insure. And then your basic rate, that's the most important thing as well. The basic rate is a value that represents the risk that we've decided, and our actuarial science has decided represents the risk of hail in your area. Now those rates vary greatly across the prairies, depending obviously on historical hail history in your area. So you take that $35,000, and then you multiply it by the rate. So let's say, for example, we're using 3 as your basic rate in that area. So if you got 35,000 times the 3%, your coverage at $35,000 would be $1,050. So you take the $35,000 times the 3%, and that's how that would be calculated.
Okay. So you have the 3 factors, and I know you mentioned that it varies by area. Can you dive into that a little bit more?
Yeah.
Did you want to touch on that a bit more?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ellen gave a kind of a really nice high-level synopsis of that. So she used a rate of 3%. That essentially means that it's going to cost you $3 for every $100 of coverage that you want. Okay? So if you want your crop to be insured for $500 an acre, which might be more representative of the actual value of the crop, it's going to cost you $3 for every $100 of acre. In that example, it's going to cost you $15 per acre to insure it up to a level of $500 an acre. Okay? But when we talked about that 3%, you think about it this way: 3%, $3 for every $100 of coverage. You could pay that $3 for 33 years, finally get to $99, and if you had one hail incident where you got the entire crop wiped out, you would be paid $100. So that's the way when I think of risk, and I think, okay, well, how many times do I have to pay that before I see potential payout? In that example that Ellen gave, that's 3%. And that's a fairly typical rate, but it does vary. You know, we have rates as low as 1.7, 1.8 in Manitoba, because the incident of hail in some areas is much smaller. So that costs you $1.70 for $100 of coverage. Now you're talking about paying that for 55, 58 years before you actually get to $100. And you can see that the risk is much lower there. Conversely to that, we have areas in the lower foothills of the Rocky Mountains in Alberta where our rates are 13, 14%.
Okay.
Imagine that, Tracy, $14 for $100 of coverage. You pay that, guess what? You pay that for 7 years, that's $98, right? So that represents, you start saying, it's going to probably hail around here every year, right? So when we talk about townships, every township has a unique rate attached to it. And that is an area that's defined by 6 miles by 6 miles. So 36 square miles. And we say in that 36 square miles, we determine that the rate is 4%. Well, how did we come up with that? Well, it's based on 25 years plus of hail data. All goes in, and the actuarial guys sit down and girls sit down and they go, okay, what's the incident of hail? What was the severity of the hail? How often did the hail happen? And all of those factors go into that to say, that means the risk in this area is, as I mentioned, 4 out of 100 or 6 out of 100. And then they come up with a rate. Obviously, in that rate, there's got to be a little bit of profit. There's got to be a little bit of money left over. We also have to pay for adjusters that'll go out and do the adjusting, etc. And our wonderful office space here. But there's 8,500 townships that we rate individually every year. You know,
Wow.
Round numbers, there's about 2,800 per province. So you're literally going in. So we get that. That's a most common question a farmer has. What's the rate in my township? What's the rate in the 3 townships that I farm in? And we say it's a 3.8, it's a 2.7, and it's a 6.4, whatever. And then they'll ask you, what's the surcharge if I'm growing mustard? Or how much extra is it if I'm growing soybeans or lentils? Or as Ellen mentioned, some of the cereals like wheat, barley, flax, oats, they don't have enough charge. So those are the kind of common terminology that we talk to when we talk to farmers about, there's unique potential costs of hail insurance.
Excellent. I love it. So if a farmer is looking to buy hail insurance, are there some factors that they should take into consideration?
Yeah.
I certainly, you've got to look at, there's a number of factors. So what is your input cost? So when we're dealing with farmers, we traditionally have kind of 3 different types of buyers. We have the buyer that says, I want to insure my crops for what I've put into it. Mm-hmm. I've seeded, I've fertilized, I've got equipment, I've got costs, and that adds all into, let's say, $175 or let's just say $200 an acre. So a guy says, if it hails, I need at least what I put into that crop back out. Then you've got some farmers that'll say, well, I've got these input costs, but I also need some walking and talking money throughout the season in the off season because I got bills to pay. I've got, gas to buy. I've got vacations to take, hopefully. So they might go upwards of $300 or $350 an acre of coverage.
Okay.
And then you've got guys that'll say, wait a second here. That crop out there is worth, you take a 50 bushel per acre crop of canola, say, and canola prices are in around $10, $11 an acre. So all of a sudden that crop out there is worth $550, $600, and a hailstorm comes along and completely flattens it. They're out that marketable crop. So some guys will insure up to closer to the full value of the crop. So there's that kind of philosophy. So that's one consideration is, and I think a lot of that is driven by who you are as a farmer. If you're a young gun, and you've got some bills to pay, you got some mortgages, you're renting land, you're trying to build, you're trying to make a name for yourself, you maybe can't afford to, have a hailstorm, beat you to a pulp in any given year. Also, you got those guys that are, kind of they've been doing well, and they might be kind of on the twilight of their farming career that can afford to take a little bit more risk, and they say, you know what, I'm not gonna buy as much coverage because they're financially a little bit more secure. So everybody's got to assess their own risk tolerance. What's going to put your bed, what you're going to put your head on your pillow at night and have your eyes closed and go to sleep and not have nightmares about a hailstorm wiping out your crop. Those are things that guys have to think about.
Amen to that.
Mm-hmm.
Amen to that.
Amen to that. Sleeping soundly at night.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Okay. So those are the factors that I was hoping that you would share, because you're so right. If you look at any farm across Canada, it's not a cookie cutter operation. No 2 farms are alike. And the other thing that you mentioned that I love is different farmers have different tolerance levels to risk, right?
Well, it's interesting because if I want to get into some subtleties as well, Tracy, you can also talk about things like, the proximity of the land relative to, that the farmer owns relative to each quarter, half, or full section. Because if he's got his land or she's got her land spread out a little bit more, north, south, or east, west, and there might be separated by a township or two, which maybe they're renting, 12, 14 miles away or whatever, obviously the risk goes down because now you'd have to talk about a pretty big hailstorm to actually, one blast anyway to wipe out all that. The other consideration is, traditionally, and it's not always the case, but, the weather goes west to east. So if you're in Township 22 and you farm in range 18, 19, 20, and 21, which are all kind of east-west of one another, and a hailstorm comes along and just goes literally east-west right across your land, you're going to lose all of that versus a farmer that has his land in townships 22, 23, 24, and 25 vertically, and maybe just one range going vertically. So again, another consideration for farmers to think about.
Clever. I didn't even think of that, but of course you guys deal with that all the time. We have land that is, close enough, but fairly spread out that they're actually in two different weather patterns all the time. So that's exactly what you mean.
Yeah, and that's the question we get asked a lot is, what's everyone else doing?
Oh.
How much are people insuring for these days? Everyone's trying to understand, and those are great questions, and it's not about keeping up with the Joneses. It's not about that at all. It's about making sure that you're as knowledgeable as you can be in a business as highly unpredictable as hail can be and farming can be. And you're trying to mitigate that risk by gathering as much information as you can.
Yeah. And looking at the neighbors and the Joneses doesn't help either. If their farm's all paid off, they have a different debt level, right? Different risk tolerance.
Yeah, you have to be able to tailor your risk mitigation strategy to your own business. And there's like you said, no farms alike. So
love it. Okay, so we are talking about insurance. I assume there is a good old deductible if we need to make a claim. How does that work?
I gotta share one other quick story with you, Tracy.
Sure.
Talking about risk. I was building a policy for a guy one time, and I was helping him because we will do that for our first-year customers that say, I'm not as good at computers, as easy as our software is, we'll help out those first-year customers, and we invite them to call. So as I was helping him build the policy, it was all canola, and it was all basically in the same township. But as we're going through each individual land location, he's going, okay, so on that one, put $50 an acre. Okay, 50. And then we go to the next one. He goes, and that one put 200 an acre. Okay. Yeah. Next, we go, put 500 on that one. So we built this policy. It was a rather large policy. So at the end of it, I said to him, I have to ask you, I've never had someone, I'm trying to identify what your thought process is as you're going through, because it's all canola. It's all in the same area. And he goes, to me, it's like roulette. I just move the chips around and I'm trying to find and hit the right number, because if I get hail where I put 500, I get a pretty big payday. So I thought that was interesting. So not everyone has their strategic thought in mind about how they mitigate their own risk. Some people do it a little bit differently, and there was an example of one. But you mentioned deductibles, and that's a great question, because deductibles are a really good way. You can certainly cut your costs. And let's use an example. There are multiple different types of deductibles, and some of them can be very confusing to the average farmer. In fact, I would suggest they're very confusing to the average broker trying to explain them. We use two very simple deductible models. One is what's called a 10% straight, and the other one's a 25 straight. 10% is by far and away more popular than 25, but combined they represent the most popular two. Let's take a 10% straight deductible. Essentially what that means is when you have hail, you're going to assume the first 10% of a loss, okay? So, for example, you've insured your crops. You had a hailstorm come through, our adjuster comes out, and between you and our adjuster, you agree there's a 30% loss. Well, you're going to be paid 30 minus the 10% deductible. You're going to get a 20% loss on that, okay? That 20% is now multiplied by the coverage level that Ellen talked about, okay? Because remember, she gave you an example where it was 350 acres at $100 per acre. So that was $35,000 of coverage for that 100 acres.
Yep.
Okay? You had $35,000. Now, if you had a hailstorm come through, 30% loss, 10% deductible, you're left with 20%. That 20% gets multiplied by the coverage level of $35,000, and you get a check for $7,000.
Okay.
Make sense?
Makes sense.
For that option, you save yourself 30% in premiums if you choose that option. So if you build a policy that's $10,000 and then click on the deductible option, you'll see that policy drops from cost of $10,000 down to $7,000. Now, I get asked the question all the time, Bruce, would you do a deductible? What's the financials? What's the math behind the deductible? And it's very simply this. There's no win in it one way or the other for the insurance company. And I like to use an example, and it takes about a minute, Tracy, but I think it's a good example to use. If you have two 100-acre plots of land, one on the left side and one on the right side of your yard, and you want to insure those, one with full coverage and one with a deductible, but you want to spend the same amount of money in premium, okay? That's the key here. This costs you the same. So what's going to cost you the same is if on the left side you have 100 acres, and you put $210 of coverage per acre on, okay? So that 100 acres now is covered for $21,000, right? 210 acres times $100, $21,000. For the same price, you can put $300 of coverage on the right side. At $100 an acre is $30,000 of coverage, okay? Same price. Now, you have hail. I will say this before I give the example. If the hailstorm is less than 30% damage, you are better off on the left side with the full coverage policy. If the hailstorm was greater than 30%, you are better off having the deductible. Again, assuming the policy cost you the same. So let's take a look at that example. You have a storm come through, it's 20% loss. Okay? Well, on the left side, you're going to get 20% times the $21,000 of coverage. You're going to get a check for $4,200. Okay. On the other side, you're going to get 20 minus the 10% deductible, leaves 10%, and you're going to get 10% of $30,000 of coverage. You're going to get a check for $3,000. $4,200 on the right, on the left, $3,000 on the right. Clearly, it was better off having the full coverage policy. Now, different scenario, 60% loss. Storm comes through and knocks out 60% of your crop. Well, on the left side, you get 60%. Times $21,000 of coverage is a check for $12,600 in your pocket.
Okay.
On the right side, you're going to get 60 minus the 10% deductible, leaves 50%, and you're going to get 50% of $30,000. You'll get a check for $15,000. There you were better off having the deductible in place. Mm-hmm. So there's no win in it one way or the other for the insurance company. It really comes down to strategies of the farmer. And I'll tell you why personally I like the deductible option. It's simply this. What I just told you was the greater the damage, the bigger the check. Okay? And the greater the damage, the less marketable crop you have left to take to sell. So when I got less crop, I want a bigger payout. Versus if I get a smaller hailstorm, and that 20% hailstorm that we had, I still got 80% of the crop left to take to market. So I'm okay with maybe not getting as much of a payout on my deductible crop. Was that a lot for you, or are you feeling that?
That is great. I love the details.
When you sat down again, where were you? What were you doing?
Did you notice?
Yes, you were even there the whole time.
I just put a poster. I have a cutout of myself.
That was awesome. Just as
funny why you weren't blinking.
Down. You know, what are you doing? Making a stew? Just figure, no, I'll just go stir the stew while he's talking. He's going on pretty long. I'll go like a stew while he's talking.
But I do think it's important, though. Yeah, Bruce, I think it's really important to kind of go down into the detail, because this is a question we get all the time. And when you have an example like that, it really helps with the comparison. And like you said, it's up to the farmer's own strategy, and deductibles can be used as a way to keep your costs down, but it is important to know what you're getting back. And he mentioned too, Bruce mentioned that companies offer very different deductibles. Each company has a whole whack of options. With us, we just offer 2 very straightforward ones. But it is important for your listeners and farmers to know that every company often has different options. Some can get a little complicated, but that is something to know too, for sure. It can be very useful, though. But it's important to know that the impact in a claim situation, like Bruce explained.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. So as you just shared, there's a lot of information, a lot of detail that goes into it to put together a good policy. What if people are going through and making a mistake? Can you touch on that?
Yeah, see, Ellen's a licensed broker, I'm a licensed broker. Whether you're an online company like Ag Direct, or whether you use a traditional broker method of having the guy come to sell it to you, whatever, we all have what's called E&O, errors and omissions insurance.
Okay.
Essentially, at the highest level, Tracy, all that means is if mistakes are made and it puts the farmer in a liable situation, then the E&O insurance does kick in, and we all have it. And Ellen takes care of this, among many other things. Ellen, what's our E&O limit? I think it's $2 million or something like that?
Yeah, it's a significant coverage, and it's standard across a lot of professional industries to have this kind of coverage if these situations arise. I'll speak to our situation too, with being an online format. Our website has been designed to catch common errors. So the things that come up pretty frequently, duplications, wrong land locations, our website's been designed, our software catches that and kind of lets the farmer know before we even get to that point. So we're pretty lucky that way. But yeah, just, is standard practice for sure. I imagine all the companies have to have it in order to get licensed.
That happens all the time. So we get a phone call. It's, hi, I was filling out my policy on your website, and an error came up and said that this land location has already got coverage on it. And, so of course we dig into it and find out that the neighbor put the wrong section in there, okay? And then we remedy that way. Or let's just say that the error didn't come up and the guy filling out the application just put the wrong section number in. Well, then what happens is he gets hailed. And then he looks and goes, wait a second here. I filled it out for section 23 and I farm in section 33. What was I thinking? Well, at the end of the day, if we go through and we can take a look at the historical policies that he's purchased, either with us or with other companies, or we look at his land locations and determine he doesn't even farm 23. Mm-hmm. But why would he? So we those ones are really easy to remedy.
Oh yeah, there's genuine mistakes happen. Absolutely.
Yeah. That and the best thing too is with Ag Direct, when you purchase a policy with Ag Direct, as what our customers are going through right now, they just go into this, they log in and they pull up last year's policy and they click a button that says copy info to a new policy, and all of their land locations are pre-populated in the application. So they don't have to sit there and mess around, because when we've got Hutterite colonies with 150, 200 quarters of land, 40,000 acres, do you think they want to go through and enter it in one by one every year? No, they simply copy, everything comes up. And now they just go into this particular land location that's identified, usually with a nickname like Johnny Boy or something. And they go, oh, and Johnny Boy this year, we got 160 acres and it's canola and we're putting 200. Move on. And they can literally fill out 40,000 acre policy in under an hour. So.
That's excellent. That is really neat about the catch-all for the mistakes, because I would have thought if you put the wrong stuff in, you are up the creek without a paddle. That's fantastic.
Well, we're speaking for Ag Direct.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be a fear monger, but I can't speak for what other companies do. We understand. We understand mistakes to be made. And we'll make sure we do our best to get on the side of the farmer when those situations happen.
Yeah, and that said, a reminder to farmers who are purchasing insurance, whether it's crop insurance, crop hail insurance, whatever, make sure you review your policy. it's always nice to catch issues before a claim situation happens. So, like I said, our website helps you kind of make sure a lot of those situations don't happen, but it's always a good idea to review your insurance every year. Don't just assume that your land locations are right year to year. That you need to take a look.
And that's because Ellen's the fixer.
I'm doing the fixing. Just you might as well prevent it if you can.
Exactly. So I wanted to take a moment really quick to let our audience know that I am going to be chatting with Bruce and Ellen in a second episode specifically about their company, AgDirect Hail, and how they are innovating hail insurance. So just a quick reminder that that episode is going to be coming out as well. And I encourage you guys to check that one out, because I know there are a few really amazing things that make you guys unique. And this is a good point to let our audience know that a great episode is coming on that as well.
Thanks for that. I just noticed you have a lot of smart things on the wall behind you. A lot of degrees and things.
So smart.
You're way smarter than me, I'll tell you that much.
Don't tell anybody, but just the same as I put a cutout here, those are all fake.
Photoshop.
They came with the frame. Just
I think they say Susie and Bob.
Garage. Take the sticker off from the garage sale there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Okay, so that being said, I love that you guys have walked us through the factors and then spoke about deductibles. Why don't we chat about what people need to know when they are applying for hail insurance? Walk us through that.
Yeah, sure. So when you apply for hail insurance, whether it's through an online company or through a broker, it's a pretty standard procedure. When you create the application and then submit it to the company, your coverage takes effect the next day at noon. So that's pretty standard right across the industry. And I know some farmers like to kind of wait and see how the crop's looking before they consider actually submitting the application. But just know that your coverage takes effect the next day at noon. And then it expires when you harvest that crop or October 31st. And most companies are at October 31st. That's a relatively new thing. We started last year. We actually heard from our farmers that they wanted extended coverage right through to the end of October, just due to changing weather patterns and everything. So we innovated and asked and asked to move that date to October 31st. So that's something important to know, that your coverage is in force until October 31st as well.
That is great to know, because the weather has been changing. Like, I don't recall years back getting big storms in September and October.
I know.
Now you can get snow and thunderstorms all at once. It's crazy.
Yeah, September hailstorms are no longer uncommon at all. So, yeah.
Well, if you can imagine that there was still at the end of last season, because of snow, there was about, I think the number was 8 million acres out of, almost 75, 80 million of shareable acres left out because farmers couldn't get it off.
Yeah.
How do you enjoy Christmas when you got, your crop still sitting out there buried in snow? That's not fun.
No.
Yeah.
I also had to laugh inside my head, or you might have seen a bit of a smirk when you said hail insurance kicks in the next day at noon. So I'm thinking, I can't see the white clouds coming and quickly go online.
So we thought of that.
Not that I'm trying to game the system or anything, but.
Well, it's interesting to say that, because candidly, Tracy, what a lot of our customers do, and they're doing right now as we speak, is they're going on and they're filling out a policy. There's no obligation to anything they're doing. So, and we're not watching, and that's the beauty about AgDirect. They're just letting it happen. So they're filling out a policy, but they're not going to necessarily buy it today. Okay. They're not going to necessarily buy it tomorrow. They'll sit back and they'll wait, and all of a sudden they'll look and it'll say, if thunderstorms, there's some heavy weather coming in on the weekend or Friday night or whatever, and potentially large hail. And guess what they do? They log on to AgDirect and buy the policy, right? It's already ready for them to buy.
So I know we're going to chat about this in our next episode, but there's merit in mentioning it here. That's really neat. So a person can go online and start creating the policy right there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
They can fill in all the land locations if they're new. If they're a returning customer, they just copy, as I said, and fill it in. But once they know what they've seeded, acres, crop, and the 3 factors, what did you seed, where did you seed it, and how much coverage did you put on? You put the coverage in, you put the application in, and then you do what's called save to my account. It just saves.
Okay.
And you sit there. And you can shop and compare. You can do a lot of things. You can sit back and wait for, a big hailstorm. A lot of guys, are waiting for something to come out of the ground because technically you have to have what's called an insurable interest.
Yeah. You
can actually buy hail insurance.
Sure enough.
The thing about Ag Direct, and I don't want to digress for a minute, but it does lend itself to, when people do fill out an application. Historically, every company, and we didn't talk about this earlier, but every company is bound by a certain amount of dollars per acre of coverage and also how much risk that they can bind their insurers on in a geographical area, okay? So you take one township, and it's somewhat proprietary, but let's just say it's in the millions that we can bind our alliance, our reinsurer, in that area. But we do run out of stock. We do, it's a situation where sometimes, and more than, it happens fairly frequently, where we get so many customers in an area that it just comes up and says, we can't accept any more customers in that area.
Oh, okay.
And it's a problem. So, but it comes down to sorry, I had a thought here, but you just don't want too much risk in one area.
Yeah, you have to spread out the risk.
So, I was going to just say so what we do with our returning customers, this is where I was going to go with this. What we do with our returning customers is because we know that well over 95% of our customers come back, we take the big number of what we know we can sell in an area, and we remove all of the liability, all of the risks that was purchased last year by customer, and we hold it for them. So if we have 5 farmers in a township, we're going to hold the $300,000 they bought last year of risk and $400,000 of liability over there. And then we sometimes only offer for sale the remaining little bit. And why do we do that? It's very simple. Word of mouth, that's what's really fueled the growth of Ag Direct. And that's why it's great that they can actually go and, buy whenever they want without getting into a situation where they're going, I gotta race and buy Ag Direct because they're always so popular, they run out. Well, no, you're a returning customer. We've got your back and we've got your coverage. So I hated to dive into that, but it's an important part because it's more than, we'll get into the next series and next episode, but it's more than just about the price of what you pay for the insurance. There's so many other factors that you have to consider when choosing a crop hail insurance provider. Mm-hmm. Good there, including whether or not the general manager does a really good stand-up comedian act. So
I was just thinking, I'm getting excited.
Oh yeah, you better hold your breath there.
Poor Ellen. Okay, why don't we change the subject, Ellen, and go back to the interview? Get you off the hook for now. So let's say I have gone on, I've purchased my hail insurance, and the worst thing happens. It hails. Mm-hmm. What happens now?
Well, this is the most important interaction that we're going to have with you as your hail insurance company. And this is the whole reason you purchased your hail insurance policies for a situation like this. So we know it can be really distressing and really disappointing for farmers. No matter how big the hail event, it's never fun to have to file a claim. But that is the first thing that needs to happen. And you need to inform your insurance company. Across the industry, it's usually about within 72 hours of a hail event. You need to let your company know. With us, it's a simple file a claim page on our website. You can do it from your phone. You can do it from your computer. You just log in, and you let us know which crops you believe were hit by hail. To the best of your knowledge, like there will be an adjustment to come out, but guess the time of the storm as best you can. Let us know any important information, like maybe you've got somebody who's representing you because you're out away at the lake or something like that. You need to put that in there, and then it comes to our office. You get a confirmation email right away. Now, again, I'm speaking to the Ag Direct experience. I'm not exactly sure how the other companies do it, but the file a claim process is the first step.
Okay.
And it's important to know that that some companies might have a different time period for when they want you to file that claim. So just make sure you let your company know as soon as possible.
Okay.
With us, once we get that claim email, you get a copy of it, so you know we're on it. It starts the claim process. And our claims team receives the claim. They'll reach out to you within 48 hours to discuss any questions you might have about going forward, and most importantly, to arrange your adjustment, finding a time that works for you and for our team to come out. Whether you have just one of our team members or a bunch of them, depending on the size of the claim, they'll come out, they'll do their inspection. And I know a lot of your listeners have probably been through a hail claim before, a hail inspection before. We always encourage our policyholders to go out with our adjusters. You need to understand how they're doing their counts, how they're coming up with the numbers that they are. I think it's the only way to really have an informed opinion about what's going on out there is to be a part of it. So we always encourage our farmers and policyholders to go out with our team. And you can ask as many questions as you like, of course. Once the adjustment is done, they create a proof of loss. Now that's the formal document that all hail insurance companies will create at the end of a claim. And it just is a formal statement of the damage that was assessed. That document then goes to head office. With us, it goes straight from our adjusters' tablets in the field to our office for review. And then a loss award payment, if there's a loss award payment to be paid, is paid for us within 48 hours of receiving that information.
Wow.
So for us, we're pretty streamlined, pretty proud of the streamlined process for AgDirect. I can't speak to what other companies do, but that is the typical process. When you have hail, you file a claim, and then the wheel starts churning. We get the claim assigned, we get it inspected, and then the loss award follows up.
Okay, so that is the full process, start to end, sorry?
Yeah, and sometimes if you're unlucky enough to have multiple storms back to back, it is important to file a claim for every hail event. Sometimes we've had farmers with 5 or 6 claims in a season. So, we would treat those as separate claims. And sometimes they'll blend them together if the time is back to back stormy days. They'll come out and do the adjustment as one lump sum. But it is important to make note of every hail event that you have on your farm and file a claim.
Tracy, and you really don't know. A claim is like when you have a hail claim, that's when you really get to know the company.
Mm-hmm.
That's, and sometimes, unfortunately, it depends on the time of year with certain companies because, and I'll say right up front and emphatically, I do not get involved as a CEO in claims handling whatsoever. I say one thing and one thing only to the team at the beginning of the year, and that is to make sure they go out there and they put a check in the farmer's hand that fairly represents their loss. Period. End of story. I don't get involved. I don't watch the meter. I don't look and see how many claims, how many dollars we're giving out too many. It is what it is. And that's the way it should be. When you're backed by a world-class company like we are, like Allianz, they're used to risk. They get it. Some years it's not as good as others. That's what they get. But I'm awfully proud of the fact that with AgDirect in 6 years, we've had almost 5,000 claims. We've never had one single customer ever take us to appraisal. And that is big news. That's a big deal.
Okay, you mentioned appraisal. What is that?
Yeah, well, it's a process. So Ellen said that when the adjustment's done, and as I said, she likes, she mentioned we like when our customers come over with us. So they sit down and say, okay, so in this quarter section, we determined that it was 38% loss. And in this quarter section, we determined that it was a 50% loss. If the farmer disagrees and he's going 50%, you got to be kidding me. That's got to be at least 80% loss on that field. Okay. Now you're into a situation where they're stuck. Okay. And I always tell farmers at trade shows, any chance I get, never sign a proof of loss until you're satisfied with your adjustment. Because for most companies, and again, I can't speak and I know how we handle things. If we have a customer that feels like they signed a proof of loss that wasn't, reflective of their loss in retrospect, then we'll go out and have another look. But I've heard that once you sign it, it is over. So don't sign it unless you're happy. So at the end of the day, you don't want to sign it because you think there's 80 and the company's only offering 50% loss. So now you start what's called the formal appraisal or arbitration process. And that's a process where the farmer engages and gets an independent qualified adjuster to represent him, which a lot of times we're asked to do. The company that's on the claim, that who is the company that sold the policy, also has to nominate and appoint an independent qualified adjuster, usually from a different company. So we've been on both sides of the fence. We've had farmers ask us to participate here, and we've asked companies to come and participate there. But at the end of the day, those two independent adjusters then go and assess the field together and determine that the loss award was 60%, 70%, whatever the number is. It becomes binding, and that's the final loss award. Okay, so there is a recourse for the farmer if he chooses not to sign. Now, I will say this: there is a cost to get the adjuster out, and there's a cost for the process. But I tell you, when you're dealing with people's livelihoods and you're talking about the amount of dollars, I'll always say to farmers, don't let them wear you down. If they're only offering 50 and you think it's 80, tell them, and don't sign that proof of loss. That's just the way, to us. And am I going to suggest that we've never had some times when the farmer says, I'm not quite sure that? No problem. Back away and let's get our claims manager, Bailey Shekenik. I believe he's the smartest man on the prairies. I say this all the time. Let's have him involved. Let's go have a look at it. But that is the one thing that, I can't stress enough. It's a stressful situation for a farmer as it is, right? And there he's lost a good part of his crop, his livelihood for the year. And it's just been shredded by the big white combine. And now, the last thing he wants to do to have to put gloves on and start duking it out to get what's fair. It shouldn't happen. And it doesn't happen with Ag Direct. So I'll leave it at that.
And it is important to know that each province handles these appraisals in a very structured, formal way. So farmers should know that there's a process. If it needs to go to an appraisal, it's very set out. So they're not alone. If they come across a conflict, luckily we haven't been in this situation. Their province, their insurance council will have a set aside process that's very clear.
I love that you guys bring that up. It's often not fun to talk about the not fun stuff. And I love that you guys haven't had to go there. But for our audience, there's different people that are comfortable with different levels of confrontation. So you have a professional out in your field and they're saying this, and sometimes people don't want to get into that conflict. So I love that as part of this series, Hail Insurance 101, you guys explained the appraisal, because I had heard that and I wanted to clarify. So thank you for sharing on that.
Yeah, it just, it shouldn't have to be where you end up at the farmer's yard and he's standing there waiting and says, okay, here we go. And unfortunately, Tracy, over the years with some farmers, because of the way they've been treated by certain companies, that's what it's come to. It's like, here I am, come and get me. This is going to be the worst day of your life, and it shouldn't be. What it should be is go out and do a thorough job, do the counts together, agree on it, and then at the end of the day, have a beer together or a coffee or whatever, and let's get the proof of loss signed so we can get you a check and Ellen can send you some money. So anyway.
Love it. Okay. Wow. We've covered a lot of ground. Do you guys have anything else that you wanted to add to Hail Insurance 101? I want to ask you a little bit about adoption rate. How many farmers at this point, as a percentage of all the farmers, if you have stats on this, how many farmers buy Hail Insurance?
Yeah, and as a private provider, we don't do any formal or official research on this subject, unfortunately, so I can't speak to an exact percentage, but with over 75 million acres farmed across the prairies each year, and then with 130 severe storm events, you can imagine that a lot of those acres are going to be covered by some sort of coverage,
okay.
Insurance policy-wise. So whether that's a revenue-based program, specific peril, or crop insurance, it's safe to assume that a lot of them are covered. I can't speak to specific numbers, but we know that from government entities and their research is that there has been an increasing trend for increasing premium. So farmers are getting more worried about the risks out there. So premiums have been going up.
I believe it.
Yeah. So.
Well, I just want to clarify, because we'll talk about in the next segment. The amount of farmers that are buying Hail Insurance, the amount of coverage they're buying is going up.
Right.
Prices, on the other hand, are going down.
That's an important part. Absolutely. Yeah. I think more people are considering their options for coverage. and realizing that there are, you can get an affordable policy just to have that peace of mind. But Bruce is right. I think due to some healthy competition, premiums have been becoming more affordable. So that's a good thing.
Okay, 2 parts. I'm going to 3 parts. We can't forget your skit, Ellen.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I'm giddy.
Oh yeah, it's a real knee slapper.
Bruce, we are going to do a full episode on what AgDirect Hail is doing in the marketplace, but why don't you give me a quick elevator pitch right now, and then I would encourage our audience to tune into our next episode where we dive into exactly who you guys are and what you're doing. Can you give me an elevator pitch, and then we'll move into common questions, any misunderstandings farmers have, and then Ellen, warm up.
Real quick, going into our 7th season, our first 4 seasons, we focused on rate. It was all about driving the broker commission out of what the premiums that a farmer pays. So if you can imagine a farmer buying a $10,000 policy, someone filling it out on some paperwork for them and getting between 10 and 15, let's use 12% of their money as a commission to do that. You buy a policy for $10,000, I fill it out for you and say, hey, Tracy, thanks very much. See ya. And then the company I put you with sends me a check for $1,200 of your money. That's not right. So when we started this, the whole focus was let's drive costs out of the premiums and get the price of hail insurance far more affordable for prairie farmers. And we did that a number of ways. We talked about the streamlined claims process. We cut the broker out of the equation. There are so many other things, online and direct, so many ways that we cut costs, cut the fat out of it to make hail insurance more affordable. Now, everybody and their brother has been chasing rate now. I hear it all the time from brokers. We can't compete with AgDirect. The rates are too low. We can't compete. I still got to get my broker commission. Where's my 12%? I hear it all the time. In fact, I'll share in the next episode a comment that one of my fellow CEOs made about AgDirect. It's an interesting comment. That said, Tracy, that's the first 4 years. And we know it goes well beyond rate. You know what it is? It's service. It's being engaged. It's having passionate adjusters, passionate people like Ellen and Sarah and Megan and Beth and Bailey. The whole team is just passionate about what we do. And we just want to always do, and we ask ourselves all the time, what's the right thing to do? And it's easy when you have a reinsurance partner like Allianz to do the right thing because that's what they're all about. They expect, as a $100 billion company, do the right thing. And that's what we strive to do. And that's probably why, and I'll say it again, 6 prior years in business, we've been the fastest growing company 6 years in a row. We're now one of the largest on the prairies. And I think it's because of our passion and our enthusiasm. I'm not patting myself on the back, Tracy, but I'll tell you, I answer the phone up until midnight. And why do I do it? And we have customer service here ready to answer the phone. It drives them crazy when I answer the phone so often. And why do I do it? Because I love doing it. If I'm not on the phone or I'm not doing this, I'm picking up the phone when the customer calls because I love doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
That was a long ride up the elevator. It must have been a skyscraper. You had to go
really
all the way.
Tall building. Really
tall building.
We're in New York on this one. Thank you for sharing. So there are farmers in the audience that are watching, and you know better than I the questions that might be in their head or things that farmers tend to misunderstand about hail insurance. Is there any of those points that you want to touch on before we wrap up?
Sure. Yeah, I was just thinking about something that farmers, not all farmers, might be aware of is the concept of a top-up policy. So this is a secondary policy that increases your coverage. So they're really useful because a lot of our farmers will get their initial policy put in at a level of coverage that they're comfortable with, and then they see how the crop's going. If things are looking good, finances are looking good, and the crop obviously hasn't been damaged by hail yet, you can increase your coverage by adding another policy. With our company, it's really easy to do. We make the website like there's one button you press and you've got your top-up coverage basically in place. Very easy, but it is something that farmers might want to know about. If you're having a particularly good year, you can increase your coverage right up until July 31st, as long as we have room. As long as your insurance company has room, it's a good way to kind of get your toe in the water with your coverage just so you can sleep at night, and then increase as you go.
Excellent point.
And another little tidbit that some farmers know but a lot don't is that your hail insurance often includes a fire endorsement. So for fire damage, it's kind of a little bit surprising, but it does include that coverage, and we've had a few fire claims from our farmers as well. So
Okay.
just a little note.
Yeah, those are two really, really good points. On the top up for sure, that question a lot. I think for me, I've already mentioned it. When I tell them that how much the broker makes in commission, they go, "What? You got to be kidding me!" So, and the other one I get a lot when they finally find Ag Direct is they say, "I didn't hear about you guys. How come my broker never told me about you guys? You've been out 6-7 years now. I didn't hear about you." Well, let me tell you why you didn't hear about us. Because your broker didn't want to tell you about us, because they make 12% commission on the other 4 companies they sell. So why would they tell you about Ag Direct? So the good news is customers or farmers are telling farmers, neighbors are telling neighbors, friends are telling friends about Ag Direct, and it's all been word of mouth, and it's fun to do. So
Excellent. Thank you guys for sharing that. If you don't have anything else to add.
I got one more thing. They can find us at www.agdirecthail.com.
Okay.
Or they can call us toll free up until midnight. See if I pick up the phone. 1-855-686-5596. The last question, do we save enough time for Ellen, or do we have to do it on the next episode?
I think it's getting a little closer.
We'll save it for the next episode. But it's
Ellen, you got lucky. We ran out of time. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I appreciate having passionate people that love their subject matter on the show and working towards helping farmers. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us. I will see you on the next episode. If you like this episode, which I'm sure you did, like it, subscribe, and please share it with other farmers. Thanks, everyone. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Impact Farming. For more great episodes and articles designed to help you manage and grow your farming operation, head on over to farmmarketer.com. Don't forget to sign up while you're there. We will see you on the next episode.